In this video, I'm sharing with you my fingerstyle arrangement of Morning Has Broken for high or low G tuning, as we're not using our fourth string. Now this is an easy arrangement, and if you're a beginner level fingerstyle player, then in the tutorial I'll give you some tips on how to make this arrangement even more simple and easy to play. Now let's begin with our demo. If you're enjoying my lessons, I would love to hear from you in the comments, and please give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help to support my channel. If you'd like to download my tab arrangements, song sheets, or song books, you'll find them all on my Patreon page. The link is down below in the video description. Next in our tutorial, we'll walk through the introduction through verse 1, as well as part of verse 3, where we have a key change. We'll go through these measures step by step to get you started, and we'll also cover some tips on how to make this arrangement more simple to play. This arrangement is in 3/4 time, which means that every measure consists of 3 quarter notes, or 3 beats. The tempo is 133 beats per minute, which means that if you set your metronome at 133, you'll have 3 beats on your metronome for every measure. Now let's begin by walking through the introduction to the song. Starting with measures 1 and 2, here's how we count the rhythm of these measures at a slow tempo. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We begin measure 1 with our index and middle fingers on the 2nd fret of strings 3 and 2. We'll pick these 2 strings together, then just the 2nd string, then just the third string. And in measure 2, we'll place our ring finger down on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string, keeping our index finger in place on the 3rd string. We'll pick these 2 strings together again, then just the 2nd string, and then we're going to lift up our ring finger, placing down our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string. And now measures 3 and 4. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We begin measure 3 with our index finger on the 1st fret of the 3rd string. We'll pick strings 2 and 3 together, then the open 1st string, and then we'll place our ring finger down on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string. Now if you prefer, you can use your middle finger rather than your ring finger here. Keeping our index finger in place, we'll pick strings 2 and 3 together to begin measure 4. Then we'll pick the 2nd string, and then lift up our ring finger to play the open 2nd string. And now measures 5, 6, and 7. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We begin measure 5 with our index, middle, and ring fingers covering the 2nd fret of strings 3, 2, and 1. Now if you prefer, you can use your index finger to form a bar chord if this is more comfortable. So in this measure, we'll pick strings 3, 2, and 1. Then in measure 6, we'll place our index finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string and our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string to pick these 2 strings together, then just the 2nd string, and in measure 7 we'll play the open 2nd and 3rd strings together, then just the 2nd string, and we'll finish measure 7 on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and here I'm using my middle finger. And now measures 8 and 9. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We begin measure 8 with the open 3rd string, and then we'll play the 1st fret of the 2nd string with our index finger, followed by the open 1st string, and then we'll place our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 1st string to pick strings 1, 2, and 3 together, and this completes the introduction to the song. Next we'll walk through verse 1, starting with measures 10, 11, and 12. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We begin measure 10 with the open 3rd string, open 2nd string, then the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. Here I'm using my index finger. Then we'll place down our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the 1st string to pick strings 1, 2, and 3 together in measure 11. Then in measure 12, we're going to pick strings 1, 2, and 3 together again, covering the 5th fret of all 3 strings. So here you can either use your index, middle, and ring fingers, or you can form a bar chord with your index finger. And now measures 13 and 14. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. We begin measure 13 with a standard G chord. Here we have our index and middle fingers on the 2nd fret of strings 3 and 1, and our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. Then we'll lift up our middle finger to play the open 1st string, and then we'll play the 3rd fret of the 2nd string where our ring finger is still in place. Then in measure 14, we'll move our index finger to the 1st fret of the 2nd string. We'll pick strings 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll place our ring finger on the 2nd fret of the 1st string, and then we'll lift it back up to play the open 1st string. And next, measures 15 through 18. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 3. We begin measure 15 with our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. We'll pick strings 2 and 3 together, then the open 3rd string, then the 2nd fret of the 3rd string using our middle finger, then the open 2nd string, and in measure 17 we're going to place our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string and ring finger on the 4th fret of the 3rd string to play strings 2 and 3, and then in measure 18 we'll play strings 1, 2, and 3, all open strings. And now measures 19 through 21, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We start measure 19 with our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. Then we'll pick the open 2nd string and open 3rd string, and in measure 20 we're going to form our G chord and add our pinky to the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Here we'll pick strings 3, 2, and 1, and then in measure 21 we'll lift up our pinky to pick strings 1, 2, and 3 together on our G chord. And next measures 22 through 24, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We're starting measure 22 with our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string. We'll pick strings 2 and 3 together, then we'll lift up our ring finger to play the open 2nd string, and then we'll place it back down to pick the 3rd fret. In measure 23, we're going to place our index finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string, lifting up our ring finger, and we can use either our pinky or our ring finger to play the 3rd fret of the 1st string. Here we'll pick strings 1, 2, and 3 together, and then we're going to free up the 1st string in measure 24, keeping our index finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string to pick strings 1, 2, and 3 again. And now measures 25 through 28, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In measure 25, we'll place our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string to pick strings 2 and 3 together, then the open 2nd string, open 3rd string, and in measure 26 we have more open strings, starting with the 3rd string, 2nd string, and finishing with the 3rd string. Then in measure 27 we'll place our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string, and we'll keep it in place through measure 28, where we'll pick the open 2nd string, 3rd string, and finish with the open 2nd string. And now measures 29 through 32. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In measure 29, once again we're starting with our ring finger on the 3rd fret of the 2nd string to pick strings 2 and 3 together. Then in measure 30, we'll place down our index finger on the 1st fret of the 2nd string to pick strings 1, 2, and 3. In measure 31, we'll place our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 3rd string to pick strings 3, 2, and 3. And then in measure 32, we'll play the open 3rd string, followed by the open 2nd string. Now we'll jump ahead to measures 45 and 46. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. In measure 45, we have our index finger on the 1st fret of the 3rd string and ring finger on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string. We'll pick these 2 strings together, then we'll lift up our ring finger to play the open 2nd string, then we'll place it back down and lift it back up again. In measure 46, we'll slide our index finger to the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. And now we're going to pick the 2nd fret of the 2nd string using our middle finger, and here we have an optional hammer-on using our ring finger to the 3rd fret. Now here, if you're not comfortable doing the hammer-on, you can pick each note. Then we finish measure 46 with the open 1st string. Now in verse 3, we've changed from the key of C to the key of D. So verse 3 is played quite differently than verses 1, 2, and 4. So let's look at some of the more difficult measures in verse 3, starting with measures 51 through 53. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We begin measure 51 with our index and middle fingers covering the 2nd fret of strings 3 and 2. We'll pick strings 3, 2, and 1. And then in measure 52, we'll place down our pinky on the 5th fret of the 1st string, keeping our index and middle fingers in place. Here we'll pick strings 1, 2, and 3 together. Now if this is too much of a stretch for you, you can pick just the 1st string. Then in measure 53, we'll move to the 7th fret of strings 1, 2, and 3. And here again you can use your index, middle, and ring fingers, or you can play this as a bar chord. And now measures 54 through 56. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. We start measure 54 with an A chord on strings 1, 2, and 3. Now we're using the same chord shape as our standard G chord, it's just moved up 2 frets. Then we'll use our pinky to play the 7th fret of the 2nd string, and then we'll lift it up to play the 5th fret where our ring finger is still in place. Then in measure 55, we'll move back to our standard G chord. Then we'll place our pinky on the 4th fret of the 1st string, and then we'll lift it up to play the 2nd fret where our middle finger is already in place. Then in measure 56, we'll keep our index finger in place, and we'll place down our middle finger on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string to pick strings 1, 2, and 3. And now measures 57 through 59. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now moving from measure 56 into measure 57, we're going to keep our index finger in place to pick the 2nd fret of the 3rd string. Then we'll pick the open 2nd string, and we'll place our middle finger back down on the 2nd fret of the 2nd string. In measure 58, we'll keep our middle finger in place and slide our index finger back 1 fret to the 1st fret of the 3rd string. Here we'll pick strings 1, 2, and 3 together. And then in measure 59, we're going to cover the 2nd fret of strings 3, 2, and 1. And here once again you can use your index, middle, and ring fingers, or you can play this as a bar chord. And now measures 60 through 63. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Moving from measure 59 into measure 60, we'll keep our index and middle fingers in place on the 2nd fret of strings 3 and 2. Here we'll pick strings 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to move up to our A chord that we played in measure 54, but we're also going to place down our pinky on the 5th fret of the 1st string. We'll pick strings 3, 2, and 1. And then in measure 62, we'll lift up our pinky to play strings 1, 2, and 3 on our A chord. In in measure 63, we'll go back to our index and middle fingers on the second fret of strings 3 and 2. Then we'll pick just the second string and then just the open first string. And the final two measures that I want to highlight in verse 3 are measures 64 and 65. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Now we've finished measure 63 with our index and middle fingers covering the second fret of strings 3 and 2. So moving into measure 64, we'll keep our index finger in place and slide our middle finger to the third fret of the second string. And we'll also place down our pinky on the fifth fret of the first string to pick strings 1, 2, and 3 together. Now if this feels like too much of a stretch, you could pick just the first string. Now from this chord in measure 64, moving into measure 65, we'll keep our index finger in place and move our middle and ring fingers to form our standard G chord. Now I promised you two ways to make this arrangement more simple and easy to play. The first way is to play all four verses in the key of C. This way we avoid the key change from C to D in verse 3, which is a more difficult verse to play. To do this, when we get to the repeat bars at the end of measure 39, we can go back to measure 10 and play measures 10 through 39 3 more times. After we play all four verses and get to measure 39 for the fourth time, then we can skip down to the coda in measure 74 and play measures 74 through 85 to finish the arrangement. Now another way that we can make this arrangement more simple to play is to eliminate the chords and play only the melody notes. So when we have 2, or in this case 3 strings played together, the melody note will always be on the string that's closest to the ground, in this case the first string. As an example, here are measures 10 through 15 at a slow tempo, playing only the melody notes. You can apply this to the entire arrangement, making it more simple to play. So each time you come across a chord, you can choose to play just the melody note, which will be on the string closest to the ground. For more of my fingerstyle arrangements and tutorials, see this playlist here. Have fun learning Morning Has Broken, and thanks for watching.